A game of poker begins when the dealer deals the players two cards face down each, starting with the player to her immediate left, proceeding clockwise until all the players have been dealt, after which the betting rounds begin. Initially, the player left of the dealer button, called the small blind, must place a mandatory bet equal to half the room's stakes. Next to place a mandatory bet is the big blind. The big blind must place a mandatory bet equal to the room's stakes and will set the base preflop bet for that round. After the first round of betting, 3 community cards, collectively known as the flop, are dealt. The second round, called the post-flop, now commences. First to act, as always, is the small blind. At present, his cards don't look much and his best hope is a pair. Unlike the first round, a forced bet is no longer required. He already has the option to forfeit the game. He also has the option to do nothing and see what the other players will do. He decides to do so. The big blind's turn. The big blind can also check, because the player before him did the action. Checking costs nothing. Consequently, he has the option to bet or forfeit his chance at winning the pot. At present, he has a combination called a pair. It's not high in the rank of hands, but he thinks it shows promise. He also does nothing and see what happens. It's player C's turn. Being seated after the big blind, he is the player who's under the gun. Because the player before him checked, this action is available to him along with placing a bet and forfeiting his seat in the game. He decides to place a bet. Time for player D to decide. He can no longer check because the player before him did not do that action. Presently, like player A and player C, he too has a pair, but significantly higher than those of the 2 previous players. His possible higher hands are 2 pairs, 3 of a kind, and a flush. He likes the idea, so he decides to match the bet. It's player E's move. The best possible hand he can have in this game is 3 of a kind. Believing he has a fighting chance, he calls. Player F's turn. His combination is only 1 queen short of getting a straight. Not just any straight, but a high straight. His hopes are up on this one, so he calls as well. Player G's turn. Should the cards to appear in the present and final round both be any club, he gets a straight, so he calls. The remaining players up to the last to act have a respectable 2 cards each and match the prevailing amount. After all bets are in, the dealer reveals the second to the last community card. On with the third betting round, called the turn. First to act, the small blind decides to stay in the game and bets. The big blind obliges and doubles the amount. Players C, D, E, and F match this amount. Player G, on the other hand, already has a flush and thinks he has the winning hand, so he raises. All the other players must now match his bet, or even raise if they are to stay in the game. Player H is undeterred and calls. Player I, on the other hand, no longer thinks his cards are viable, so he quits. Player A calls. Player B calls. Player C, already having an initial bet, can still continue in the game by matching the new amount or even exceed it. He decides to stay and adds more to his bet in order to equal the prevailing amount. Player D decides to continue as well, and also adds more to his existing bet. Player E and Player F both feel lucky, so they call. The last card completing the community cards is now laid face up on the table. Now it's time for the final round, called the river. The small blind, Player A, realizes he has no combination and folds. The big blind stays and places a bet. Player C calls. Player E calls. Player E calls. Player F already has a straight and is willing to bet everything to win the pot, so he goes all in. Player G also goes all in. Player H goes all in as well. Player B follows suit. All remaining players go all in. This betting among remaining players in the last round is called a showdown. All bets are in, concluding the last betting round. Let's examine each remaining player's card combinations. Player B has formed a 2 pair. Player C also has a 2 pair. Player D also has a 2 pair, but is considered higher in rank compared to the previous 2 because of his king pair. Player E has a 3 of a kind, which aces even the highest ranking 2 pair. Player F has formed a straight, which is even higher than 3 of a kind. Player G's combination is a flush, which is above straight. Player H has a hand called a full house. The full house, being the highest hand in ranking order, is this game's pot winner.